Gotta cut that out. I'd like to call to order to convene the Board Finance Workshop. I would like some clarification from board members if you would like to have presentation and then questions. Would that suit people best to hear that? And then, or would you like to, if you get a question as they're speaking, which one's better? Anybody? Presentation? Okay. Ms. Rawls, do you have any suggestion about that? Okay, thank you.
Is this working? Okay. All right, thank you all for this time to talk with you about some finance issues. I wanted to share with you sort of what our financial year looks like as far as what are our responsibilities during the year and what time of the year those responsibilities happen. And then want to talk a little bit about debt service, and then I'll be happy to answer any questions. And I have a few slides of questions that I've already received. So here are some important dates that happen in the financial year for a school district. Obviously, our state fiscal year is July 1 to June 30th, with the federal fiscal year being October 1 through September 30th. That's important for when grant funding happens, because the federal fiscal year drives the majority of our federal grants. We submit our annual financial audit to the Department of Education on December 1st every year. We claim our grants quarterly, so we have expenditures every month. However, we claim those expenditures for our federal grants on a quarterly basis. It has to be no later than November 15th, February 15th, May 15th, and August 15th, with the August 15th deadline being the one for June 30. We receive EFA and EIA funds monthly from the state and local tax revenue monthly from each county. So this is what it looks like for the first quarter for us. We begin the state fiscal year, the new school year, on July 1. We're working a lot in budgets, but we're also closing out the prior year. So we're working in 2 years at the same time, closing out old accounts payables, closing out payrolls, while we're still working to get things rolling in another year. So we've got 2 years open at the same time that we're working in. Do an awful lot of hiring in the summertime, obviously, because that's when the teachers have the opportunity maybe to work for another district, and we're hiring new individuals. So we have a lot of work in HR that corresponds to work in the payroll side. The Department of Education has a database called the SC Educator Database, and that's where all of our employees are entered into. This is how they determine what our funding should be by employee. So all of our teachers are entered into that database with their years of experience in education, and that's how they calculate the amount that they pay the district for those teachers. We are working in new payrolls. We also have summer activities. We had a lot of activities last past summer with summer enrichment camp and academic reading camp, so we have a lot of other activities that go on, but we're also working to plan the dates for the audit. When are the auditors going to come in to do their field work? When we head into August, we're still working in 2 years. We work to calculate the debt service millage, working with teacher supply checks. Every teacher gets a check. Obviously, this year we did $375. Well, that's about $1,600 different checks that have to be loaded into the system. It's more of a manual process than you would believe, even in this information age. Then there again, the grant claims due from June 30th are due August 15th. September, very similar processes, working with the National Board Supplement. We are making sure our teachers that have that National Board designation are receiving the supplement that they're entitled to. We're confirming our payroll data matches the certification system. Are we paying a teacher appropriately? Are we paying them if they have a master's degree, or do we have them listed as a bachelor's degree? And just confirming that we have all of our data in the system correct. September is the time that our audit group will most likely do their interim field work. So we are expecting the auditors to be on site the last week of September of this year, and they will do the majority of their field work, doing their sampling of transactions and testing their data that week with us. It may spill into an additional week. October, beginning the federal fiscal year, it also includes the 45th day of school reporting, the day for average daily membership to be reported. This is the day that they will calculate any changes to our EFA and EIA funding at the state. Big day for us. Tax notices are also mailed to our taxpayers in October. November, we should have draft financial statements by the first part of November to review and finalize. We'll confirm the single audit. We will review, there's an annual template that shows expenditures by function and by category that would have to be completed. All that's due to the state by December 1st, like I said. It's also the time when we reviewed our general fund revenue estimates. I talked to you all when we passed the budget this year that we would come back in November after we've had an opportunity to review the estimates, review what revenues we will be receiving versus the estimations that we had in the springtime. Again, all this is still estimates because we have the adjustment on the 135th day of next year. We have grant claims again in November. December, we're working again with the financial statements, getting all that information submitted, but we're also now planning for the next fiscal year. So we start planning for the 22-23 year and working with executive staff and with the superintendent to ensure that we have the goals, the mission, the vision, all are on the same page. What are our goals for the next fiscal year so that we know where we need to plan to have our revenues line up so that we are meeting the needs of the district, meeting the needs of the students, and providing for equity across the district. Now we're into January, so now we're at the beginning of a tax year. We're dealing with W-2s and 1099s. We're working again with budgets. We're meeting with directors and principals, planning for the next school year. A lot of state reporting happens at this time with the ESSA, with excess costs, maintenance of effort, so lots of state reporting happening, mostly with the federal programs with excess cost and maintenance of effort. February, we're reviewing capital needs, reviewing our building program, planning the spring bond issuance based on the needs that are identified. We're reviewing our tax collections to determine at what rate are we seeing tax collections coming in. We're estimating at about a 95% collection rate, and we hope that that will be what we see or better. It was actually better than that this year, but with the federal stimulus not being in the system as much as it was last year, there's a little bit of a concern that will collections continue to come in as strong. We'll continue with our budget meetings. Again, grant claims coming around. March begins the House budget debates. The General Assembly, House Ways and Means, has to finish their budget plans and have the budget printed on the desk of the House the first week of March. So the budget sits on the desk the first week as the committees review it, and then the House debate begins after that. We will finalize the capital budget, provide any bond resolutions for the spring issuance, and in March we hit the 135th day of average daily membership. Again, revenues could change based on what our ADM is on that 135th day. In April, we are still budget planning, but now we're dealing with the Senate side. The Senate does their budget debates in the month of April. We begin planning the audit, so the auditors usually come in May and do interim work. They'll come in and audit our records from July 1st through April 30th, so it gets a lot of the sampling out of the way before they come back the next fall. We have to provide them with the schedule of expenditures of our federal awards, and we'll continue planning with our capital programs. In May is when the SCAGO bond sale is available. It gives us the opportunity to issue debt and collaborating with other school districts around the state, and in doing that, we pool our money together and have better opportunities. It also provides for a lower cost for us as a district because we're sharing cost with other districts. We're not out there by ourselves. So it is the most economical way for us to issue debt is through the SCAGO bond sale. We have the budget workshop for the board as far as the 22-23 general fund budget. We'll go through the first reading, grant claim time again. Then we go to June with the final reading of the budget, and then we prepare to close the year and start all over again. So that's kind of our year in a nutshell. And I just wanted to provide you all that. I don't know if you all have ever seen that information, but I thought it would be helpful to know that we do a little bit more than everything else, the ongoing tasks that you see here. ESSER funding has added a new layer of a lot for us. You documenting every expenditure, ensuring that we are providing and meeting the plan that we have set that has been approved by the state, and are we documenting it to the level that will be approved by the federal government when it's audited. We deal with student fees, school bookkeepers, our insurance, our liability, property insurance, workers' comp, student athlete insurance, cash management. Cash management's a huge part of what I do, monitoring where do we have cash. Are we going to have cash sufficient to make it till the tax receipts start coming in December, January? Payroll is a constant. As soon as you finish one, you're knee-deep in the next one, especially with a lot of the temporary assignments and additional pay opportunities that we've had this last summer and this year. Procurement card, purchase requisitions on a monthly basis, purchase orders, competitive bids. Assets is something a lot of people don't think about, but there's only certain ways that we can surplus property. We have to go through a system where we're, under the state guidance, we can surplus property through the state organization for property surplusing out on Boston Avenue in West Columbia, or we can use GovDeals, so it still has to be a competitive type system. Inventory management, fixed assets, we're dealing right now with retainage payable on construction projects, all this for the audit. Grants management, we do a lot to support the fund managers in ensuring that the funds are spent according to the budgets that they have provided to the state and within the plans that have been developed. We deal with student enrollment changes. We get a lot of fiscal impact statements from the General Assembly through the Department of Education in the spring. If they're looking at passing a law or a bill, then they want to know what impact it has to us on a financial basis. So we have to review the bill and ensure that if they're wanting to add a personal finance class and make economics optional in a high school level, how does that impact us financially? Well, that might mean another teacher, because the teacher that's certified in economics might not be able to teach personal finance. So, I mean, all of those bits and pieces we get asked about during the General Assembly session. Working with in-person versus virtual instruction, we're having to monitor our enrollment in virtual instruction so as to ensure that we receive the maximum amount of funding that we can from the state. We're limited to 5% of our enrollment going through virtual, so that's a constant evaluation. Are we within our 5%? And then there's always additional reporting that comes up throughout the year through the State Department. Wanted to touch on debt service millage. As you can see here, the current requested debt service mill rate was 73.3 mills. The county calculated the minimum debt service mill rate required is 50.2 mills. If we were to set the millage and certify it at 50.2 mills, that would use 100% of our debt service reserve fund at the county. That means that if collections don't come in, we default on our debt, because we do not have funds on deposit with the county to make those debt payments. So 50.2 would be the minimum, and that's based on 95% collection. So if collection rates were lower than that, we would not collect enough money to make the debt payments next spring. And then again, you're also dealing with some overlapping debt, some debt that's due later in September of next year before additional tax payments come in. So there's a lot of bits and pieces in that, but I just want to make sure that everyone understood that that would use 100% of the reserve fund. And it would be important, in my opinion, as we've talked about a target mill value, to maintain the 73.30 mill rate so we minimize that fluctuation for the taxpayer. If they see it drop down, then it goes right back up, then that's confusing for the taxpayer. They don't understand what is going on, why is the rates go down low and then they're going up high, and what is the school district doing? Whereas if we maintain a mill rate, it's a little bit easier to explain how we're doing and what we're doing, especially if we're going to maximize the use of the 8% debt capacity. Because when we do that, maximizing that 8% debt capacity, they're going to see facility changes in the district. They're going to know where the dollars are. They will see things happening. They will see the studies that we're doing on the equity in the facilities through the district so that we can provide the same level of opportunity for our students that are in one school as compared to students in another school. We would do this through short-term financing. That's the 8% money. We issue debt in the spring, pay it off the next spring. I would recommend that we target a 15 to 18% level of debt service reserve fund similar to what we have for the general fund that we have here at the district. So in board policy, it does state that the general fund, that we have the fund balance, it'll be at a level of 15 to 18%. Again, that would be my recommendation for where we target the debt service reserve fund that the county holds for us. This would cover us if we did have lower collections. If we were to come into a 93, 92% collection rate, this money would be on reserve to make those payments for us. We would analyze this every year. We would pay, if we had more than what we needed, we would use that funding to pay outstanding debt as it is available. Some examples of some things that we would do with this 8% debt capacity funding would be building and classroom renovations. We would be able to buy furniture. I had a principal in this district tell me that the seats on her chairs that her babies sat on were cracked. That's not okay. That's not okay in my opinion. That's not fair, because that's not every school in our district. That was that school. We have needs in our one-to-one technology, being able to keep our technology up to date and ready for our students, maintaining our athletic fields and facilities and equity throughout the district, and our arts facilities. That takes care of every student. That takes care of the athlete. That takes care of the artistic student. That takes care of the academic student. We have taken care of all of the students equally in the district at that point. If the board chooses, and it is certainly your choice, if you would choose to use that 8% funding model, there is an opportunity within the next month or two to have an additional issue. We would come to you with a plan once the total dollar amount was determined as what we could issue. This would be if we left the millage rate at the 73.3. We would come to you with a plan. We could begin architectural planning so that we would get ahead of the summer. We would be able to get into planning. Where is the equity? Where do we need to address? What needs are there in the district that needs addressing immediately? Getting our architectural planning done now gets us hitting construction in the spring versus starting architectural planning in the spring. It would enable us to begin several of our projects quicker. It would take advantage of lower interest rates that we're seeing right now. And all this is within the capacity of the debt limit and the millage rate at 73.3 mils. I want to read this statement that I have at the bottom because I want to make sure everybody understands what it says. If this 8% debt model sets this district apart from the majority of the other districts in our state. This doesn't happen in most districts. This is an opportunity that many districts would be in envy of. It provides us the opportunity for our instructional, athletic, and arts facilities to measure up to the excellence in our instructional, athletic, and arts programs. Our facility needs are important. This district has the chance to make the commitment to provide district-wide equity and facilities for 16,700 plus students, preparing them for their future in this global market. And I think that's important. We have excellent programs. Help us have excellent facilities. And now I had received several questions from some board members. Do you want me to address those first, or do you all want to ask questions?
What I'm thinking is, since these were ahead and they are answered in here,
Yes, ma'am.
maybe from what she's just said, that new questions, because we can go over these, we can read these answers.
Okay.
I have a question.
Sure.
I apologize.
I know it, I'm sorry, mine's.
I thought by law, this is worded as if we have a choice on whether to do the 73.3 or the 50.20. But I thought by law, the auditor set the millage rate.
No, ma'am, we set the millage rate. That
Okay.
calculation.
Isn't there like a lawsuit going on right now in Beaufort County? Because, and I see Ms. Heisner shaking her head, so maybe you need to address this, but I'm confused because I thought the auditor, we said, here's how much money we need, and the auditor does the calculations and they set the millage.
I talked to Chris Harmon this morning about this. They provided the calculation at the 50.2, and that he agreed that is the minimum and that leaves no reserve, but he looks to the district as far as setting the mill rate. Now, Ms. Heiser, you're welcome to address this, but that was what information I received from him today.
I think here in Lexington County, y'all have had a long history of working well with your county auditor and treasurer. And so there's an element of cooperation, which you're seeing here, so that you, the school board, can suggest the millage, debt service millage you'd like, and your county officials work with you on that. In Beaufort, there was no cooperation, and county council did last year file a lawsuit against the county auditor. The lower court ruled that the county auditor does not actually set debt service millage, that in that case it would be Beaufort County Council, but that case is on appeal and has not been decided by the Supreme Court. But what Marty's describing is how it works here in Lexington, and it historically worked very well.
So the state law does not, the state law says we set the millage, it doesn't say the auditor sets the millage?
State law says that the county auditor shall set such millage as is necessary for debt service and to fund a sinking fund for the bonds. That language has traditionally, in my mind, been interpreted as the county auditor in fact sets the millage. But the lower court in Beaufort ruled that that language means that it is a ministerial act and that the county auditor does not actually have the legal authority to set debt service millage. So that's going to be a up in the air question until the Supreme Court answers it. But y'all, business as usual here, you will see your county auditor working with you for the number that y'all are comfortable with.
Are they fiscal autonomous in Beaufort County?
Well, the county and the school district are a little bit different, and this was actually a county lawsuit, not a school district lawsuit. Okay. But there are some similarities, but we are following that lawsuit, and we'll make sure everybody knows once the Supreme Court has ruled.
So a follow-up question to that, if, I'm assuming that we have to tell the county that we have plans for this additional money. We can't just say we want more money, correct? And so is there any danger that Richland County might not agree with this, or do they have to agree with whatever Lexington County agrees with?
It's my understanding, and you may know different, but from what my talking with both counties, Richland County looks to Lexington County as the lead on that, and actually Lexington County is who holds all the funds. Richland County does not hold the funds, so Lexington County more or less takes the lead on all of that. When I was talking to Mr. Harmon, we did talk about the fact that we would, be able to provide them what our capital plans are, what our, we're looking to maximize our 8% debt capacity, and he said with information as that and with board agendas and with documentation, there would be no challenges to the 73.3.
So are you asking for us to make a decision on that? And if so, when in the agenda would we be doing that?
We have already actually made that decision in June. It's already been certified to the county at 73.3 mils.
Okay, I thought that when we voted in June, hold on, I'm looking for the vote. I thought that Ms. Hines made the motion that we would do the minimum necessary to service the outstanding debt for this fiscal year,
Yes,
which to me says 50.2 mils.
that would, you can certainly set it at that, but you would be using all the $14 million that we currently have in our debt service reserve fund as well.
And I'm not proposing to make that decision at this point. I guess I'm just saying that as a board, based on the motion that Ms. Hines made, to me that says 50.2. And if we're saying that we're directing the county auditor that we want more, that we have to make a motion to do that. Because the motion that was made was minimum necessary to service the outstanding debt for this fiscal year.
And there again, like I was mentioning, we could actually issue that, it's around about $5.5 million in the next month or so, which would be outstanding debt that would be also serviced this fiscal year. So when you add all of that in there and you put that 15 to 18% reserve fund in place, that gets us back up to that 73.3 mils.
I guess what I'm saying is I don't believe that this board voted for 73 mils. I believe this board voted for the minimum. Now, I'm not saying we shouldn't take another vote and increase it, but my reading of the motion that was made was that we voted for the 50. And we're asking for this money from our taxpayers. and we don't have a plan for it yet. So I think we should really discuss this and make a conscious decision. And, you know, this district's held on for money for years and not helped a lot of our schools that need help. So I'm kind of worried that we're just going to do the same thing again without having an open and honest discussion about whether or not we really need this money from our taxpayers, and if so, how are we going to spend it?
Yeah, I have a couple of things that I wanted, but we asked the former CFO, I did that same question, and I read the state law. The state law says that this board has to certify to the auditor. And what was going on was that the administration was certifying to the auditor that were varying. Richland County had one millage and Lexington County had another. And we discovered that, and we asked the CFO, and he said that he had certified that, which is not what the law says. And I think Ms. Huddle is right in what she's saying there technically. Whether or not we do that again, you know, I'm talking about the level of the millage would be up to the vote on the board, and that value judgment hasn't been made. I have one other question, though. This has come up to me several times. People have asked me, and this is referring to the general fund. Okay, we have an 15 to 18% fund balance compared to the overall budget that we put into the fund balance. Okay, if you were to estimate, and maybe you don't want to do that tonight, you can do it some other time, but a conservative amount of money. I know you mentioned cash management a minute ago. Okay, and I would say, you know, any business owner would say 1.5 times the amount that they're actually going to need, they salt away. They wouldn't get into, you know, anything below that. But my question is, this has come up, people have asked us, what is the actual cash management that you would project that we would need if we were to take of that, I don't know what it is, $40 million worth of fund balance roughly? If we were to take that, how much of that do we actually need for cash management?
I can tell you it is recommended that you have at least 2 months worth of reserves, and at a $200 million budget, you'd be looking at, probably about $40 million.
$40 million.
Yes, sir.
So we don't have any. That's what I was trying to get at. Is I've been asked, you know, how much money would it actually take, you know, to manage? So if we were to if we had our entire general fund balance, at 15 to 18%, it would take all of that money if we got into a hard spot where we weren't receiving our income from the county or the state, right?
It's a little over 16%. I think it's 16 and a quarter, if I'm not mistaken, when you're looking at 2 months. And when we have that, if we were to not get any funding for the state for 2 months, we would still be able to operate.
That's what I was trying to clear up.
Yes, sir. So if we are in that target 15 to 18%, that is exactly where we need to be. At the end of this year, if we have more than that, then it would obviously be for the board to determine if they would like to assign any of that unreserved fund balance to. We've done employee bonuses in the past. We've done capital in the past. So that would be the employees, or that would be the board's decision.
Well, we're talking about right now some capital improvements in the eastern part of our district.
Yes, sir.
And we want to make sure that we're taking care of those seats and those things, that furniture that you just mentioned.
Right.
Do you project that for the, you know, this year just ending, that there would be some additional funds that would be in excess of 15 to 18% that we could use?
I believe there will be, yes, sir. I don't have an exact number, but I do believe we'll be over 18%.
Well, we definitely want to spend those on the schools that are not receiving their fair share. I mean, that's just equitable, and that's what we want to do.
Yes, sir. And I think when you add those dollars with what our abilities are with the 8% money, I just think it provides a great opportunity for this district. That there again, that's for the board to determine if you want to follow that funding plan. But if you do, I think we can take our current resources and add that with other resources and certainly provide for equity at a faster pace.
And I think you told us, Dr. Ross told us at the last meeting that we have a residual $3.6 million fund that was left over from prior capital improvement that that wasn't used in the prior years?
We do have some funds available. I'm calculating that amount now. I was working on it before I came over here this afternoon. I'll have a definite number for you. It is definitely in that 2 to 3 million range. It may be as much as 3.5. We're working through what projects are on the slate to be completed and what projects have already been completed. I was working with Mr. Cannon on that today, so I hope to have a number for you before the next board meeting.
Thank you so much. Those are my.
Before I take another question, just to follow up to what Ms. Huddle said, I think we are all committed to the existing schools and we want to know their funds there, but I think her point about a plan is very important. You know, like we know we had a few years back, the MB Con did a facilities plan of all our older schools, but we as a board, especially the new board, we really never put any projects in any kind of order or plan. So, you know, I think just to say that's what we want to do, but there is also the need to know exactly.
Ms. Hammond, at our facilities committee meeting, the last meeting, we discussed the next meeting, the superintendent is going to present his version of what the plan should be. I think we were at the point of determining how much we had to spend, and what we've got to do now is reach consensus on the millage that Ms. Rawls has presented to us. So that was the discussion at the time. So I think the superintendent is going to present that.
That's great. All right, all right, let me see, before I come back to Ms. Huddle, any question down here? I'm going to go back to Ms. Huddle.
I just want to say, whoa, I might be yelling. I don't know if I'm yelling at you or not. Excuse me. Kind of going back to both what Mr. Lovelace said and what Ms. Huddle is referring to with the motion. I guess with the motion, just for conversation, when we talked about that in June, I actually don't have that in front of me, but I was thinking that motion, the motion was worded at the discretion of the administration, I believe, and I was thinking that wording was meant to infer that it was that minimum amount that we needed to be able to fund our project. So that the 50 number, I don't remember that being discussed. The 73 number, I do. I just don't have that in front of me right this second. So I for what it's worth, that's what I thought that was. And to kind of piggyback on what Mr. Lovelace was saying about our facilities meeting, I believe as we were talking, it was that, you know, the administration feels strongly that 8% money is probably the best way for us to accomplish our goals, especially within the east side of the district, and that he's prioritized several big projects coming up. So I just think that we need to keep that in mind, that whatever the millage is, we need to be able to accomplish our goals in a way that we're not shocking the taxpayers. We're not having to ask for something like a bond referendum to get, I mean, for us to have schools that have cracks in the chairs is appalling, especially if our district is in such great financial shape. And, you know, if we want people to emulate what we're doing, if we're going to be a great district, our kids should not be sitting on cracked chairs anywhere in our district. And that educational equity that Dr. Lovelace has been, or not Dr., sorry, Dr. Ross has been talking about is really important. So I think that I think what I hear Ms. Huddle saying and everybody kind of saying is that we want to make sure that we're aware of what is in front of us. So those numbers are really important. I get that. But I also, you know, for what it's worth, my opinion is that we need to make sure that we're giving the administration the ability and the authority to make those decisions that will help our students. So,
I have a follow-up question. If you look at the calculation of the millage rate, and you took out the use of the reserve that we have, aren't we actually adding to that reserve at the 73.3? Because I did a calculation and I used last year's because I didn't get this year's yet. And it looks to me like it should be closer to 68. So it feels like not only are we keeping the millage rate where we need to be so we don't dip into that reserve fund. We're actually adding more to it. So could you do a calculation for us? Could you tell us what it would be if we just left the existing sinking fund there? What would the millage rate need to be?
I can.
Okay.
Now, do you want to take into consideration any opportunities we have to issue debt that's not already been issued, or just based on outstanding debt?
No, just based on outstanding debt.
Okay.
I'd just like to know what that number is. And because I agree with everyone, the issue that I have is that why do we have cracked chairs when we've got millions of dollars in reserve? This, you know, for years, this district has overtaxed our taxpayers and just sat it in the bank. We're going to have a plan, we're going to have a plan, we're going to have a plan. And I just think that's backwards. You wouldn't do your house that way. I wouldn't go borrow money to build a house and just sit it in the bank earning 0.4% interest. And it's bad enough if I did it to myself, but doing it to our constituents bothers me.
One thing I wanted to bring up, if in the resolution that we're going to look at later tonight, there is a section in there where there is a plan to reset that debt service reserve at the county to within that 15 to 18%, using some of those funds to actually pay cash for our refunding and then issue debt for the balance of that. So we would be resetting the fund balance that the county holds for us based on that target 15 to 18%. So my goal also is to not leave money in the bank. That's not why I'm here. I'm here to provide you all the best advice that I have based on my experience and what I've seen happen, what I've seen work in other places. And my best advice is to let's write that reserve fund balance at the county to where it needs to be in that 15 to 18%. So if collections get off, we're still making our debt payments, but also take advantage of this opportunity. And if that's at 73 or if it's at 68 or wherever it lands based on what the will of the board is, then that's where it is. But we do have areas that need to be addressed. I think the situation with the cracked chairs is more we didn't know about it than the fact that it existed, I'll be honest with you. But at the same time, those are the kinds of things that we would be able to address and more timely, because this would be an annual situation where we would be able to not only continue with our 5-year capital plan, that 15 million, 10 million that we vote on every spring, we would also be able to do major capital projects from that point on.
Ms. Rawls, I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
If this, and I may be wrong, I'm remembering this from another meeting, might have been the one that Ms. Huddle's talking about, but if millage is not reduced in a vote by the board, does it automatically go down?
No, ma'am.
It just stays
Unless-
until the board votes to a different millage?
I can tell you, I did certify the rate to the county auditor. It has been my practice to do that based on what the board has voted on in a public meeting. I certified the wishes of the board. So I did write the certification letter to the county, to Richland and Lexington County at the 73.3 mills. We can change that up until the rolls open on September 30th, but I need to get that information to them ASAP so that they can configure their system. My best recommendation still is at the 73.3.
Yes, Ms. Gardner.
I was just looking up the minutes from the June meeting, and I just want to read the motion because I think that might shed a little bit of light. It just says that Ms. Blackburn-Hines made the motion to approve setting the operating millage rate at 246.10 and the debt service millage rate at a calculated rate to meet the debt service obligations not to exceed the current rate of 75.4. So at that point, our current rate was, and it was unanimous for the 6 of us. There was one board member absent that night. But it says not to exceed 75.4 is the current. So that was the current in June, but now it's changed because of...
It would change for the next tax year that goes out this in September or beginning of October. Yes, ma'am.
But I guess I need clarification as to why it changed to 73 if we had set it to stay the same. We didn't. I know that's what I would like for you to explain to us.
So I
why it
calculated and put in a sinking fund in it. Right at the end of June, our sinking fund was about $14.9 million. That's what the debt service reserve fund is at the county. I calculated the outstanding payments that are made, they'll be payable in April, and then the overlapping payments that'll be due next fall before another tax roll will come out. And I put in a reserve fund. Honestly, I put in one higher than 15 to 18%. I put in a little about 13.5 million is what actually is in there in the calculation that I did at the 73.3 mils. So that, in doing that, that's where we have an opportunity to issue the additional debt. We can certainly take it down. I can calculate it with a 15 to 18% target target fund balance, and I can provide you that number shortly. I've got all the ability on my computer.
Ms. Rawls, I know we have that on there for tonight, but in time-wise, if this board needs, because I'm so excited about Mr. Lovelace's facilities committee, that's the kind of thing we've needed. It's time-wise, would 2 weeks mess us up if we have more questions about that have been brought up from the workshop? I mean, time-wise, do you have to have it tonight?
For the mill value, it would be better for me to know that you're going to change it. If you're going to change it from the 73.3, that way I can alert the auditor about that, both auditors. I would prefer it tonight, but I understand if you need more time. And there again, I would just provide the information to them.
Well, I ask that because I'm not deciding that. I'm asking the board how you feel from what we're hearing tonight. And then, you know, if you, and we have an opportunity to, you know, but we need to talk about it in public. So I want to see how you feel.
I mean, I was thinking that at the very least we should discuss it. So when it came time to approve the agenda, I was thinking about making a motion to add this.
To wait till...
No, to add it tonight. And we've already had a discussion about it.
Oh, it wasn't on the, I'm sorry.
So that you wouldn't have to wait.
I got you. I was just getting time-wise for you, but you do need to know because you figured everything on that, and that's your recommendation. I got you.
My recommendation would be the 73.3. However, I will calculate what it would be with the debt we currently have outstanding and a target fund balance of that 15, 18%, and I can give you that mill rate. And we can go from there. And I would need to know if the board is comfortable with me certifying that in a letter as I have done in the past. And based on board vote, not Marty's vote, but I'm certifying what the board voted.
Mr. Lovelace?
Yeah, that's a procedural matter, and I'm not sure, I mean, we can change the agenda and discuss it tonight.
Well, it has to,
You can.
it has to be an emergency.
You can. Board policy, BEDB lets you change the agenda for a non-voting matter with 50%, which would be 4 people, or for an emergency, which I think we could make the case. This is an emergency for 2/3, which is also 4 people. So we would have to have 4 people.
Well, I mean, if that's going to be deemed as an emergency, but do we have a, you know, person is Andrea going to be here later on? Scott, okay.
Excuse me, Scott, will you address Mr. Lovelace's question?
My question is simply, is it under FOIA law? I thought you could not change, you could vote to change an agenda in a meeting, but you could not actually take action on it that night without advertising it for at least 24 hours and then.
In an emergency, I'll have to find out. I don't want to tell you wrong. I know the amending the agenda would require the 2/3 vote, or as Ms. Huddle said, it's the same difference by majority with the board as it is.
I just want to make sure because
Yeah.
I mean, having chaired other governmental things,
Yeah.
Especially with the town of Chapin, we were told, and we attended seminars, and it said that, you know, that you could not make substantive votes
And this
on
would
the
be an
same
amendment.
night as the agenda. I understand if you make it an emergency.
But this would be an amendment to a previous vote to clarify.
It's not on the agenda right now at all.
Right.
It's not on the agenda.
Well, let me check it. Just let me make sure.
Can I,
Okay. The discussion is, but not action on it, right?
So we could add it to discussion, Ms. Huddle? Is that what you were saying, that you read?
No, because we have to make a decision. That's the point, is that she needs a decision. SCSBA said that
That's right, I agree with the exigent circumstances is basically your FOIA exception. But I don't, those exceptions, you would have to state that. I mean, if you guys are, your emergencies are typically more along the lines of weather events, that sort of thing. So it's somewhat of a judgment call to determine, and I don't know if this would fall under the category of exigent circumstances for the purpose of FOIA.
The reason I bring this up, not to get contrary or anything, but we all know that the editor of the state paper is holding us to strict rules that he has made up in a lawsuit against us based on FOIA.
I agree.
And I certainly do not want to do something, that we could avoid by, taking a little extra time. If it's deemed exigent
Right.
circumstance, I'm all for it. I just bring the point up to make sure that we're, 100%,
Right.
in the right.
But I didn't hear the emergency piece of this until you mentioned that. So I think that is the judgment to be made.
I ask a question while we're in the middle of all of this? I'm just trying to seek clarification about why we would, what the motion would be, what it is that we're trying to change that isn't already on the agenda, if you need something else.
One thing, we might be able to do it as a discussion, the way Ms. Gardner, if I understood the way you read the vote from June, if it services all the debt and it's less than 75.4, I believe we would be within the vote from June. If we had a discussion, I could tell you what I recalculated the value at. I don't know if there would necessitate a vote, I don't know.
If it's under that 75, based on that motion, so I'm confused as, I just my issue is, it says, and the debt service millage rate at a calculated rate to meet the debt service obligations, okay? That's 50 point whatever. What we're being asked to do is increase our debt service obligation to commit to borrowing more money, correct? So Ms. Rawls, I believe, wrote that recommendation. So I would like clarification too, because I didn't realize we're trying.
We're not,
I just want to make sure that we understand what's going on, because right now I don't, so I apologize.
I think we need clarification, and I'm going to do it, but I'm going to hear from Ms. Gardner, and then I'm going to get clarification so we know for sure what we're saying.
I think that the purpose of that motion, if you go back and look at the board packet, was to set the millage rate. We had actually decreased the millage rate that night to the 73.3. That's what that meant to do. And that if we, in order to change it from 73.3 right now, we would need a new motion. I don't think, because I think if you look at the board packet along with this motion is specifically talking about keeping it constant, even dropping it a little bit to cover, and you showed us what that covered. We just didn't have the exact number at
we
the
did
moment.
not have the number that night.
So that's what I was going to say. I think that the actual wording is very vague, I agree, but if you look at the board packet, it's not. So, that's my clarification. If we wanted to change it from 73.3, I think we would need a new motion, and we'd have to amend the agenda to do that. But to keep it where it's at, we don't have to do anything. That's my opinion on what we did here.
Ms. Gardner, thank you. I think you're right, but I am still, I'm going to go back to Scott, what I was about to say. I do know that Andrew White has explained emergency is something like there was a leak at the school and, you got to fix it. And you got to. I'm thinking this is not an emergency. That's me as chair. And I agree with Mr. Lovelace about being very careful about it. And I still don't think that since I know our next meeting was going to be pretty much the theme of facilities, I think it would go very well with that in 2 weeks. But that's me. Yes.
I don't disagree with that. Again, exigent circumstances are usually weather events or actual emergencies, and I just have not heard enough information to determine whether this is an emergency that would allow you to bypass the 24-hour rule for you.
And especially since it deals with taxes.
I mean, I just want to make the case, I don't think you can infer what a motion says from, I understand what Ms. Gardner's saying, but I think you have to read a motion on its face value. And the face value says, as necessary to meet debt service obligations. So to me, that wording, if we stick with the wording, doesn't say 73.3, it says 50.2.
May I make a recommendation, Madam
I
Chair?
would love to hear from a recommendation.
Well, I think we did have a meeting with the Facilities Committee, and I think we have a fiduciary responsibility, also a responsibility to the entity of the school district to ensure that we have a conversation about raising or lowering or keeping debt service millage based on the instructional needs outlined. And I think we have to couple both of those conversations together. To have them independent of each other, I don't know, puts us in the best position to be responsible to the taxpayer, but also to our obligation of educating the children. I go back to the definition. We exist for one reason and one reason only, and that's to educate the children of School District 5. So what I would, we will give preliminary estimates of the cost to do a new east wing at Irmo High School, which is our #1 priority, as well as everything down from playgrounds to arts and athletics, all the way down to seats. But we need to present that in, as well as the recommendations for the meals. That way the board knows this is what the administration is trying to buy. This is what our debt service and operational millage gets us to get to that point. I agree that if we have funds that have been sitting in bond account on 8% money accounts, and we have not used that, that needs to be used. Ms. Rawls has outlined about $1.8 million of unrestricted 8% money that we can use in addition to that to put all of this together in a plan. So tonight we weren't prepared to discuss any millage rates because that was set in June. However, if we need to come back with a special call or a meeting on the 27th, we as administration are working diligently to put those priorities together from the recommendations of the facilities, but we wanted to do that. We wanted to split tonight's meeting. Tonight was going to be finance. The 27th was going to be the facilities. But if we need to do that special call meeting, we should do that. That way you know this is what the administration is trying to do, and this is how the best way to pay for it.
Thank you, Dr. Ross. Ms. Gardner.
Sorry, this might need to be something, a discussion for future, but I think this might help clarify us. Is if the county's calculated our minimum debt service at 50.2, and that's what happened in June. You told us that this was our minimum. Why is it different? Why is our minimum 73.3 and their minimum stated as at 50? Maybe there's a discussion there that would help us all understand what's happening.
That 50.2 is the minimum to make the debt service payments. So if it was your income and you're bringing home $10,000 a month and your outgo is $10,000 a month, you have nothing in savings. If you had $5,000 in savings and you made $5,000 and you have $10,000 worth of bills, you take your savings and wipe it out and everything that you make. And that's what the 50.2 would do. We have $14.9 million in a savings account, and that 50.2 would use all of the 14.9 and everything that we assess. If we collect at a 95% collection rate, we would have nothing left on deposit at the county at a 50.2 mill rate.
So that number basically is not even, it's not an accurate number. It's just a number to tell you that this is what you owe. It's not a number to tell you what you would need to pay it,
Correct.
basically. But the 73.3 included, you might want to remind me of this, didn't we say we were going to have a budget of a certain amount to borrow?
We would pay off all our debt at the 73.3, and we would have a reserve fund of about $13 million on the back end.
Okay, so that's what the 73 is?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I just needed clarification.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. Guys, I'm looking at the time, and Mr. Lovelace and I are just talking. Ms. Rawls, our presenters are, it's time for us to go into executive session. So are they going to, or was it the whole presentation you, and they were not going to talk?
They were here in case there were
Just
additional
for
questions.
Okay. So there's nothing before we go into executive session. I mean, I just want to be fair and hear from any of them.
No, ma'am.
If there's anything. Anything from our discussions that one of you brilliant people want to add, since you're our financial possible advisors? You got 2 minutes.
I'll take less than 2 minutes.
No.
I think it really gets down to, what are your needs?
Okay.
Let's find out what the needs are. You did a facility
And that's-
study a couple of years ago. I know when we looked at the 19 bond issue, we were going to say, how do we fund those needs? Let's look at what you have, what those needs are, and then determine what's appropriate. What is the appropriate mill rate? I'm grasping at straws to figure out what's the objective, what's the target? How much money do you need for projects? What's the maximum amount, or what do you need what do you want the levy to be? But the levy really shouldn't drive it. It should be the needs. What are the needs for the children? What are your facilities needs? And then let the financing follow that. If there's constraints, it's real simple. There's constraints. Here's a hard deck. Here's a top number. And then we work down from there.
Thank you. Because I think Ms. Huddle made a wonderful point. This is a new board moving forward, and it doesn't go well for taxpayers where we have not identified needs and money sits there that has not been used. And so whether it's true or not, there's a perception that, those school districts, and I don't mean just us, they just are hoarding away that money, and, the taxpayers is willing to pay anything that they know is needed, but not to overpay for things that we're not doing. So thank you for that. Does our other gentleman want to say something? You get a minute? We're good? All right, let's see. Well, we do. We actually have a minute. How about anybody? We didn't hear from you, Mr. Hogan. Are you okay with everything? Good, thank you. Then I will go ahead and adjourn, unless you have anything. Or should I wait a whole another minute? Yeah, I need a motion, but I don't want to stop early if you have anything else to ask or say.
I make the motion that we adjourn to executive session, but don't we have to read into the record?
Well, let's
After the
adjourn
vote,
this first,
after
and
the
then
vote.
you do that.
Okay.
Okay. So any second to adjourn this workshop? Second. All those in favor of adjourning the workshop? Okay. No opposed. So we are adjourned. So now we.
Hold on, we need to make a taping.
Oh, she needs something to change.
Yeah, before we call to order the 6 o'clock meeting, we need to change our tape, yeah.
It's a